Good morning, folks. Welcome to today's Pastor's Tip, the 16th of April, 2020. And today I want to talk to you about money. And so we've entitled this session, Money Matters. Now, the Bible has a lot to say about money. The Bible has a lot of good to say, and the Bible has a lot of, for lack of a better word, bad to say about money. The reality is, many of us just got some money from Uncle Sam yesterday in this stimulus package. And I know the design behind it. That's not my point here today, okay? Some of us did, some of us didn't. So the question then becomes, okay, for some of us, this is going to help get us through a trying time where we've either lost our job or reduced in hours or whatever the case might be. And that, I think, is designed to help get us through this period. So for some of us, this is very, very needed, okay? For some of us, I could use it, but I'll probably be okay. And then for some others of us, it's pretty much, for lack of a better way of putting this, free money. So that's mainly the crowd that I want to talk to today, but hopefully we'll share some biblical principles about money anyway. This is not thorough, it's certainly not exhaustive, and it would take a whole lot more to deal with money in general, but I just want to make a couple primary points this morning. So the question we might ask ourselves then, depending on what group of people we are, the level of necessity, is what am I going to do with this money? Well, let me give you first of all a principle, okay? Principle number one is tithing. Okay, tithing. So you say, well, tithing is Old Testament. And I would say to you, you're exactly right. The Bible commands tithing in the Old Testament, and it is not commanded in the New Testament. Yet, it is encouraged, or at least it's not condemned. So, for example, when the Lord talked about people giving, He never condemned tithing. He actually said to build on the tithing, and certainly to do so from the heart, which is where the New Testament takes it to, is our giving both sacrificially and from the heart. So two things there, okay? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit this morning. So should you tithe on it? I'm going to leave that up to your conviction. I'll tell you what mine is. I tithe on everything that comes into me, and I do it for a couple of different reasons. Number one is I personally believe that New Testament tithing is the place to begin in our giving. But number two, and this is kind of practical for me, it helps me resist the temptation to be covetous, to hold on to money, because there's a reason why the Bible tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil, and there's reasons why the Bible has so much condemnation about money. But it's not money itself. It's why we want money, why we want to hold on to what we have, and why we even want to make money. Proverbs has a lot to say about that, unjust gain and things like that. So I would say give according to your conviction. All right, but let me say something else about giving. The Bible has a lot to say, but one of the first things I want to point out is some cautions that the Bible gives us. And this really does hit the heart of the matter. And that is to not be covetous. So, for example, in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 3, watch how this unfolds. Because as I talk about this, in the beginning, you're going to be thinking, well, I don't do any of that. But I want to make a connection. In Ephesians 5:3, Paul says, but fornication and all uncleanliness or covetousness, let it not be once named among you as becomes saints. So every one of us would say, well, I'm not a fornicator. I'm monogamous in my relationship with my spouse. I'm not exercising any level of uncleanness. I'm innocent there. But covetousness can be a whole lot more subtle. And it might be worse for us than even those outward and obvious sins. So Paul says to the church at Colossia, chapter 3 and verse 5, he says, mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, all manner of evil, and covetousness, which is idolatry. So you see the problem here? The things that I want can become the things that I worship. And there's a reason why people say things like, you can tell where a man's heart is by where his pocketbook is. And our money has a lot to say about us. You know, we Westerners particularly have a hard time with this because we have such ease to have many things, and we have rights, and we think things are just owed to us, even money. So I just want to throw out a little bit of a caution there, but let me couple that then with some opportunities that the Bible gives us. So, for example, in James chapter 2, verse 16, and you know James has a lot of warnings about things in his book. He says in verse 16 of chapter 2, and one of you say unto him, he's talking about a person who's needy, one of those people would say to that needy person, depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful for the body, what does that profit? In other words, if you have it with you, you have the means to help somebody else, and you give them some positive platitudes. God bless you, brother. I love you. Pat them on the back, and may the Lord keep you warm and filled. And all the while, you've got the means to provide for them right now. So here you have this opportunity and the means to meet that opportunity, but you don't take it. What's going on in the heart that would prevent us from doing that? So let me go then to 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Paul says, but I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And he which sows bountifully or gives out bountifully will reap bountifully. Now watch verse 7. Every man according to as he purposes in his heart, so let him give, or of necessity, for God is loves the cheerful giver. And you probably know that text. So here we have an opportunity to give to God and give to God's people as is needed. So I'm going somewhere with this. Just hang on with me. The point I'm trying to make is that some of us may have the government give us $1,200 or whatever. Your conviction should decide whether you are going to tithe on it or not. And I would suggest tithing to your local New Testament church. And as a byway here, giving to missions is not tithing. Giving to the youth group is not tithing. Giving to anything other than the general concept or the general fund, if you will, is not tithing. Okay, you're exercising prejudice. And I'll just tell you, in most states, laws will say that a church can take money, even if it's given to, I don't know, missions. If it needs to pay its light bill, they can do it. So you can, allocate it wherever you want, but the church has the legal right, for the most case, to do what they need to do with it. So you give it to God and let God handle the rest of it, okay? So where do you give? Well, I'm going to suggest to you, number one, as Christians, give through your local New Testament assembly, okay? Give to your, for lack of a better word, your church. Start at home. We start at home evangelistically. Jerusalem, Judea, the uttermost parts of the world. God says he takes the gospel to the Jews first and then to the Gentiles. That's a principle involved there. So is it with our giving. So, for example, Paul says in Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, he says, as we therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them which are of the household of faith. So we want to start at home. We want to do the most of our giving at home. Once we've done that, then we can start allocating out as to other places. Now, if you're not a converted person, then obviously these principles don't apply to you. It means nothing. But if you are a converted person and you don't have a home church, number one, you need to have a home church. And number two, your giving should go through there, because they typically have inroads to people who have needs. We get calls all the time, people wanting money, but we have ways, we have committee, we have ministries, we have ways to discern how this goes out, so we don't just put money in people's pockets and who knows what they're doing with it, okay? We just want to be a little careful about that, and you should too. I think you should, okay? So when we start talking about this thing, and I can already see that a couple people who were here have hung up, and I don't know why, but when you start talking about money, people don't like it, and they'll just hang up because it's out of sight, out of mind. Now, let me just say this. I've actually been challenged by the church I pastored in South Carolina before. People said, Pastor, you don't talk enough on money. It's a fault of mine. I confess it. I don't like talking about money, okay? But I know I need to. It's a blessing to give, and there's some disciplines that should go, and principles that should go along with it. But let me give you some concerns that I know people have. And I want to do this with some Bible texts, okay? So, for example, in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, you hear this text quoted for all kinds of stuff. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. And this is a pet peeve of mine. I hear people quote that verse all the time, and the girls' soccer team went to Belize, and we can do all things through Christ, which strengthens us. Now, I'm not saying God's not going to strengthen the girls' soccer team in Belize as a missions trip. I'm just saying that's not germane to what Paul's point is, okay? So then he goes on in that very same chapter, actually earlier in verse 9, he said, let me pull this text up for you real quick. He says, those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. So if you look at that text, what Paul is talking about, and we want God with us, we want God to provide for us all things. If you look at that text, Paul's talking about giving. He's talking about money. He's talking about providing for the ministry and, by extension, obviously then other people. But note in relation to our giving, Philippians chapter 4, verse 15. Paul says, now, he's talking to the Philippians and they're giving to him and his ministry. Now, you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but you only. So here Paul's commending them, not just for praying for him, not just for participating with him, but the reality is in this world, money is an engine to get a lot of things done, and these people were participating with Paul, and he's commending that, okay? 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 15. And this, if you read chapter 9 of 2 Corinthians, he's talking about giving. He has a lot to say about giving. And in verse 9, and this is the conclusion of this, and I love this text, he says, thanks be unto God for this unspeakable gift. What's the unspeakable gift? The unspeakable gift is that people gave, sometimes sacrificially, and God gave them back. God provided for them in their giving. So here's what happens. We have this tendency to think, well, if I give, I won't have any more. That's because we have this tendency to put our money into what our confidence, hope, into what we're giving money-wise instead of the God who gave us the money, the ability, and the opportunity. So the Bible says clearly, if we cast our bread upon the waters, it will come back. You say, well, so if I give, I'll get. Well, in a way, you might, but either way, God will provide. So we don't give so that we will get. That's prosperity gospel. We give out of a heart of love and compassion and obedience to the Lord. So my encouragement to you today is when you get this money, you seek the Lord's face on it. Some of us will have, again, it's more of an expendable or disposable income. And it might be that you can help other people out who are really needy when you're not. And listen, I understand. I'm not trying to be pious. There's a couple things I'd love to have. But right now, I'm eating, my rent's paid, I'm good to go. But what about that person who doesn't have all their needs met? I believe that it's within the spirit and the nature of the New Testament church and the principles and examples that we're given to us in the Bible that we are to give to those people. We are to help those people. I'm going to share with you a conclusive text on that in just a second. But I just want you to know that I have the same feeling and the same temptations. There's a couple of things I would mention that I would love to have, and before long I'm probably going to need, but I won't do that because surely somebody will want to do that for me, and I have a pride problem. I don't like taking gifts. But there are people in your life, in your family, and in your local ministry who do have needs, and God may be giving you the ability to help them out, okay? Then lastly, it again is the heart of God's people to give. We see that as early as very early in the book of Acts. We see it all throughout the New Testament. I've given you some text on that. But let me read for you 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 13 and through 15. Paul says, I mean not that other men be eased and you be burdened. So he's not trying to say, I want you to endure the hardship so that somebody else can have it easy. That's not what he's saying. In fact, he's trying to say that's not what I'm saying. Verse 14. But by an equality that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality. And now watch here in verse 15, because this is concise and clear and good. He says, as it is written, he that has gathered much had nothing over, and he that had gathered little had no lack. So my concern is that we have people in our families, in our lives, in our ministries, who may be getting a check, but it's not enough. They're going to need beans. They might need their rent paid. They might need formula. I don't know. You can fill in a lot of blanks there. I believe it would be wrong for me spiritually to go out and get some things that I just want because I got this free money when my brother is hungry. My brother is in financial difficulties, straits. That would seem to me to violate so many scriptural truths that I've tried to share with you this morning. Now, I'm not trying to tell you what to do with the money. I'm just trying to share with you some principles that I hope will help. Now, that said, if you are a member of Hunters Creek and you want to give here, we have a benevolence fund. You can give to that, and we'll make sure that it's distributed. We have actually a committee for that. We also have a ministry in our community that we give to regularly, and they ensure that people who are not connected with our church are helped out as well, okay? So, we're going to do everything disciplined, and there's a process we go through. We don't hand people money or anything like that. So if you're hearing this today and you're in Michigan, you think, oh man, I'm going to run to Hunters Creek. Well, you better slow down because it's not going to work that way, okay? But it will work. Then lastly, let me leave you with this. If you don't have a home church, I want to invite you to meet with us this coming Sunday at 11 a.m. We're doing our services live stream through Facebook Live, just like a lot of people are, and you're welcome to meet with us and worship with us, but do treat it like a worship environment. So just take it for what it's worth, eat the meat, spit out the bone, operate on your convictions, but ensure that your convictions are conducive to what the biblical teaching and principles are. All right, God bless you, Lord willing. We'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.